We are currently at the place in the timeline where every sane United States citizen is collectively asking the same question. Who Trump feeling like?
So the United States and Iran has agreed to a ceasefire deal.
Iran has accepted the 2-week ceasefire, but it's not as cut and dry as President Trump made it seem.
You gotta be fucking kidding me. God damn it.
Ceasefire update, the Israelis are already seemingly violating it.
Hey everyone, I have very big news, huge update. They're doing it again with this war, okay? The ceasefire has already been broken. People were all excited saying, oh, finally, can we get some peace? No, they're at it again. A certain very powerful country decided to bomb Lebanon, avoiding the ceasefire. Iranians are saying, well, crap, we're going to lock down the strait again. Screw your oil prices, screw your shipping. It's not looking good, guys. My sources that are over there on the ground in the Middle East says the damage, you will not believe. I keep getting videos, I keep getting pictures. The damage of these bases, of these homes, of the cars, I mean, it's unreal. Nothing that we're being told from the media is even making sense. We're over here one day talking about a moon mission, spending billions of dollars, not even landing on the moon, and the next day we're talking about eradicating an entire country. I'm telling you, this next 2 weeks is not going to be peace. It's not going to be ceasefire. According to my sources, there is a major power shift coming. All this info about the military, I'm telling you, it could be World War III. I'm not even joking.
Now, I want to get your take on the latest here, as I know that the U.S. and Iran have agreed to a 2-week ceasefire with plans to begin negotiations in Pakistan on Friday. And of course, Trump is framing this as a victory because that's what he does, claiming that he finally got the Strait of Hormuz open as if it wasn't open before he launched this illegal war of aggression. How do you see this ceasefire and the way that it's being presented?
It's quite clear that the United States under Trump has failed, and so has the Netanyahu regime. I think we all remember that at the beginning, they were calling for unconditional surrender. And then gradually they had to revise and change their position until ultimately Trump came to his 15-point plan, which Iran rejected. And despite the fact that Trump has been saying for a long time now, he will obliterate Iran, he will take Iran back to the Stone Age, and more recently said he will demolish Iranian civilization. And by the way, no Western media outlet, no mainstream media outlet complained, threat to carry out crimes against humanity and the greatest Holocaust by far in human history. And that just shows how corrupt the Western establishment, the Western political establishment and corporate media is. Ultimately, Trump had to accept, after all that, and the rejection of his 15-point plan, he had to accept the Iranian 10-point plan as a framework for negotiations. Now, that doesn't mean we're going to come to an agreement, but that itself is a sea change. And the United States has failed to destroy Iran's missile capabilities, Iran's drone capabilities, Iran's defense capabilities, and Iran has been hammering the Israeli regime day and night, U.S. positions day and night, the assets of the U.S. regime in the Persian Gulf region, and punishing those regimes that have been assisting the onslaught against Iran. And now the Israeli regime does not want peace. It is carrying out the most barbaric attack so far on Lebanon. They are bombing everywhere, apartment blocks across the country, vicious airstrikes carrying out mass murder in order to somehow stop the war from ending and to prevent oil and gas and fertilizer from being exported from the region. The Israeli regime is more than happy to see the global economy collapse.
How do you view the position of Israel here and how it could be a thorn in the side to a potential end to this war? Also a useful tool to a certain extent for the US because they get to play good cop. They get to say, yeah, sure, we want to make a deal, but then it's Israel over here preventing it and kind of prolonging this war?
The ceasefire won't last, and Iran won't abide by any commitments when the Israeli regime is carrying out atrocities in Lebanon. Lebanon is a part of the agreement. The Pakistani prime minister has openly stated that. And so what the Israeli regime is doing is unacceptable.
So how do you view the position that Iran is in? It already has made a very powerful statement with its attacks on U.S. military bases in the region, with its attacks on Israel, and with the fact that, exactly as you noted, it has not fallen, and the U.S. and Israel have not been able to accomplish any meaningful goals.
I think Iran and the axis of resistance are in a very powerful position. It just shows the limitations of the U.S. empire, and the whole world has seen that. And in reality, Iran has been fighting on behalf of the entire global majority. Iran's sin is that it is independent and that it opposes the strangulation of Cuba, the subjugation of Venezuela, and of course the genocide in Gaza. These are the real sins of Iran. And Iran on its own, it has friends, but really in reality on its own, it defeated the empire along with its proxies and its Israeli ally combined. This was a key turning point. I think perhaps since the Second World War came to an end, this is in a way perhaps for the empire, the Western Empire, the most decisive turning point.
Iran war update. The ceasefire appears to have fallen apart and may not have even been there to start with. Guys, this may go on for a minute or two. This is important stuff. Trump last night claimed he was no longer going to nuke Iran and have a nuclear war and stuff because they've agreed to a ceasefire and it's great and it's going to be unconditional. We're going to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, except the Strait of Hormuz is still not open. It may not open for days. And when it does, Iran said maybe they'll only let 10 ships go through for the next 2 weeks. 100 ships a day normally go through. 10 in 2 weeks, that's 2 a day, even less. I don't even know where to start with this. Iran is still blowing up its neighbors this morning. The ceasefire is in effect, but Iran attacked Kuwait, UAE, Bahrain, and Saudi Arabia. In Saudi Arabia especially, they attacked the pipelines, the key oil pipelines that go to the Red Sea, which is the sort of escape valve to avoid the Strait of Hormuz. The Red Sea is the good one, blew that up. The Iranians the Strait of Hormuz is not open. That was Trump's unconditional, right? Oh, we're not going to have a ceasefire unless they agree completely to open the strait, no conditions. Well, it's not open. It's not going to open. Iran says they're going to still control it. They're going to still charge a toll when it finally does open. It's going to be $2 million a ship now. Iran never controlled this before. It was open waterways before. Any ship could go through. Now Iran controls it. We've given it to them. Now they're going to charge a toll where they're going to get money. Trump gets asked about it. He goes, well, actually, we're thinking of maybe sharing it with Iran, and both of us do a toll together and we split the money. So you're going to give Iran half control over the Strait of Hormuz when they had no control before, and you're going to give them millions of dollars per ship? This is insane, guys. We got a show tonight, 6 o'clock Eastern, to discuss this, where I'm going to be talking a lot more. This is a freaking cluster F right now. Iran hasn't opened the strait. They're not opening the strait. They haven't agreed to anything. Trump says they agreed to give up their uranium. They didn't. Trump said initially, oh, we've agreed to Iran's 10-point plan. Most of it's fine. Iran's 10-point plan, Iran then goes public and goes, let me tell you the 10-point plan. Donald Trump just agreed to full reparations for Iran. Donald Trump agreed to lift all sanctions on Iran. Donald Trump agreed to retain control of the Strait of Hormuz. Iran would get to control it. Donald Trump agreed that the U.S. would withdraw all troops from the Middle East. No, he didn't. I mean, he did, but he didn't. Trump last night said, oh yeah, their proposal was totally fine. That's what their proposal is. And it goes on, it gets worse from there. It's horrific. Guys, this is such a mess. He didn't just taco, he caved more than any president in American history. This is possibly the biggest strategic defeat the Americans have certainly suffered in decades, let alone ever. We lost this war. We lost 13 service members died for this war. Our gas prices are through the roof for this war. Airlines today, oh my God. Anyway, I'll be back tonight at 6 o'clock Eastern. Do share this, guys. Do follow, and we're going to be talking more about this. What a freaking disaster.
Iran has accepted the 2-week ceasefire, but it's not as cut and dry as President Trump made it seem. This is from the Iranian foreign minister, who just posted to his social media account saying, if attacks against Iran are halted, our powerful armed forces will cease their defensive operations for a period of 2 weeks. Safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz will be possible via coordination with Iran's armed forces and with due consideration of technical limitations. That is very different than what President Trump said he agreed to. Trump, just a short time ago, said, subject to the Islamic Republic of Iran agreeing to the complete, immediate, and safe opening of the Strait of Hormuz, then he would agree to this ceasefire. Iran's foreign minister put a bunch of caveats in there. He said any travel through the strait must be coordinated with Iran's armed forces and will be subject to technical limitations. What does that mean? I don't know. It's also important for you to know that Iran's Supreme National Security Council posted their own statement about this 2-week ceasefire, and they say that President Trump has agreed to give the Iranians control over the Strait of Hormuz. That is brand new. While Iran has illegally been controlling the strait for weeks by threatening attacks on passing ships, they have no legal international authority to do that. But if President Trump has in fact agreed to give Iran that power over the strait, that would be a significant step in the completely opposite direction of President Trump's stated goals for this entire war. The other big question mark here is this 10-point plan that Iran and Trump keep referencing. What exactly did Trump agree to in this 10-point plan as a starting off point for these negotiations? Some of the points in it reportedly include the United States lifting sanctions against Iran, the United States abandoning military bases in the Middle East, and the United States paying for the reconstruction of Iran, just to name a few. It's also clear, based on the statement from Iran's Supreme National Security Council, that this war is not over. But from their point of view, they are painting the ceasefire as a win for Iran and a backing down by the United States. They say they will continue to negotiate with the United States, but our hands are on the trigger, and as soon as the slightest mistake by the enemy is made, it will be responded to with full force. Now, it's unclear what the Trump administration is going to say about any of this, and if this is indeed what President Trump agreed to, or if this is just Iran posturing. We'll see exactly what is happening if and when any U.S. or allied flagged ships pass safely through the Strait of Hormuz.
Spoke to an agent yesterday from Dubai who said that there are lots of distressed deals available now. And I said, don't buy anything. Be very careful. Right now is not the time to buy. We are on the cusp of World War III right now. It all depends on what this madman Trump is going to do next. I think everyone should have a very serious plan for what they're going to do if we end up in World War III. And the GCC is very potentially likely to get wiped out, to be honest. If they go ahead and go bomb all the infrastructure and oil facilities and energy facilities in Iran, then Iran have said they're going to do likewise in the GCC. So for people like me who've invested in Dubai, that's really negative news, but it is what it is. What can you do? So certainly do not be looking at buying anything in the UAE or anywhere in the GCC at the moment. It's the worst time to buy. And the last time we had a crash, 2008, people talk about that, and prices fell 70%. Some of the off-plan stuff that was selling was down 80% because it was really overpriced. It didn't happen overnight. It didn't happen within a week of the crash. It happened by the end of a year. So if you are looking to, invest in Dubai because you think the market's going to be a good deal, it won't be till probably the end of 2026, maybe 2027, when things are settled down, but people are still not buying because they're very reluctant or concerned. Plus, people won't have money. So be very careful about where you're investing. I think everyone should prepare for World War III in the sense, that you've got to keep some cash available, be diversified, don't have all your eggs in one basket, because the future is very uncertain right now.
So the United States and Iran has agreed to a ceasefire deal. Okay, Wigs RSK first, all right? The 10-point plan that Iran put out against the United States to end this war, they said Wigs RS agreed to it, but I don't think he agreed to it just yet. Ain't been no confirmation. But I will tell you this. Benjamin Netanyahu The UAE and Saudi Arabia and Lindsey Graham's people said do not agree to the ceasefire. Do not do it. And honestly, I feel like something sneaky is about to happen. I feel like Iran is celebrating right now, and they should, because Trump backed down. But I feel like once the Strait of Hormuz is open, he gonna start acting stupid again. I think he's doing this to quiet people because he already knows that, hell, 70-something congressmen was wanted the 25th Amendment because they say he fucking cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, okay? There are already people on his side saying, hey, man, you may want to back the fuck up because shit's looking real kind of bad for us. I don't believe he's going to stand on business when it comes to this ceasefire. I don't. I have no faith in this man not to do something erratic and fuck shit up. But the stock market is about to look good. Gas prices may go down for a bit because right now they're $111 a barrel, bitch. But we gonna see. Let's just see how this shit goes.
I've been asking this question since the beginning of the conflict. Why isn't Israel sending their troops to the Strait of Hormuz? According to the Times of Israel, in January of this year, they have 48 F-35 fighter jets. According to Al Jazeera, they have, this was in 2023, they have approximately 170,000 active military personnel and a further 465,000 in the reserve forces. And according to globalmilitary.net, they have a flotilla of 49 warships as of this year. So Trump has been asking all the allies for assistance in this war, but as far as I can work out, I haven't found any evidence that Israel has sent any. Does anyone know why? Aren't they the main characters in this war? Aren't they the instigators? If anyone has the answer, I'd love to hear it.
You've got to be fucking kidding me. God damn it.
Ceasefire update, the Israelis are already seemingly violating it. For those of you who might not be aware, a couple of hours ago, the US and the Iranians agreed to a 2-week ceasefire while they negotiate a permanent peace. And as you might imagine, the number one thing that was on everyone's mind when the US and Iranians agreed to a ceasefire was what was Israel going to do? Initially, it seemed good. There were Israeli outlets saying that the Israeli government was willing to comply with the ongoing ceasefire agreement, something that I honestly was kind of surprised by. But then, you know, the Israelis did the most predictable fucking thing ever, which is say that the ceasefire actually doesn't apply to their ongoing invasion of Lebanon. As a result of that, even though there's officially being a ceasefire imposed, we've seen multiple Israeli strikes in Lebanon, including an Israeli strike on an ambulance, in case you didn't already realize that they're fucking evil. Now, if you've been paying attention for the last couple of years, or, you know, even the last couple of decades, it really isn't that surprising that the Israelis are continuing their ongoing invasion of Lebanon. Over the years, the Israelis have invaded Lebanon repeatedly and have been open about their ambitions to occupy Lebanese territory at least up to the Litani River. Similar to Palestine, many Israelis view much of southern Lebanon in particular to be areas in which they have a right to occupy. And as with their occupation in Palestine, the Israeli strategy for this territorial acquisition is invasion and displacement to maximize their control of land and minimize the amount of people on it. And for years, the Israelis have been arguing that they have security needs that are driving this territorial acquisition, that they need to fight Hezbollah, a southern Lebanese resistance group that has been resisting their efforts to invade Lebanon for years. But for everybody that has two fucking eyes, it's pretty easy to see what's going on. The Israelis are using security as a pretext for invasion and occupation, for territorial theft. And now it would seem that even with a US and Iranian brokered ceasefire, the Israelis are unwilling to let their foot off the gas for even a second in Lebanon. They're continuing their strikes in a way that could actually prove detrimental to the ceasefire as a whole, because I honestly don't see how the Iranians could allow the Israelis to continue attacking a fundamentally critical support front. So yeah, it looks like we possibly have 2 weeks of a ceasefire, but for the Israelis it seems ceasefire means that their opposition ceases firing and they continue. We'll see what happens next. As there are more updates, I'll be making more videos, but in the meantime, as always, free Palestine, free Lebanon, Assalamu alaikum, and
Happy Tuesday. Whatever that might mean for you. Today is April 7, 2026. I'm here to give you the updates surrounding the war with the United States. It's not real versus Iran. Let's get it. We are currently at the place in the timeline where every sane United States citizen is collectively asking the same question. Who Trump feeling like? No, really, who is Trump feeling like? And let me quickly remind you all of what this man, the United States president, stated on April 5th, as today is April 7th, okay? Only 2 days ago. Listen.
If your children are watching, be warned, the president did not use polite language. Quote, Tuesday will be power plant day. and Bridge Day, all wrapped up in one in Iran. There will be nothing like it. Open the fucking strait, you crazy bastards, or you'll be living in hell. Just watch. We should note that destroying civilian power infrastructure is generally considered to constitute a war crime under international law, though the president could argue that the infrastructure has dual use and also is utilized by Iran's military.
And then after posting that, the president of the United States decides to extend the deadline of the ultimatum that he issued against Iran. Mind you, Iran officially rejected their ceasefire plan, so there's really nothing to extend. However, the president has extended the deadline to today, April 7th, 8 p.m. And what Trump states is the third and final deadline. He suggests that this is the final deadline, but we shall see, as we know that this man is a proven liar. He's a liar, so we gonna wait and see. So now the deadline for Iran to accept the ceasefire plan is extended, even though Iran had already officially rejected the ceasefire plan. So now the world waits to see if Trump is actually going to obliterate the entire civilization of the Iranian nation after 8 p.m. today. But see, with the restructuring of the military, the United States military, you understand, firing of 12 senior officials and over 30 generals rejecting, defying Trump's orders, how are you going to get it done? The threats to obliterate and destroy the entire civilization of Iran. How are you going to get it done if you have no loyal military? How are you going to get it done? No military backing equals no retaliation. No following through of any threat of any kind. Not to mention, to follow through with the action of actually destroying the entire civilization of a nation is a war crime. It is a war crime. And if Trump actually figures out a way to fulfill that, considering you understand our military is not really working with him, understand that the judgment day that the United States will face, oh baby, is going to be a movie. But yeah, that's your
breaking Iran war news. Good or bad? Not clear. There's maybe a ceasefire, but the ceasefire sounds like it's already falling apart. Listen to this closely, guys. So Donald Trump announced about an hour ago that we had reached a ceasefire with Iran. He agreed to Iran's terms, and he said, actually, they proposed a 10-point plan, and I agreed to most of it. Iran then turns around and says, great, we agree too. Israel says, we agree too. Trump and Israel say, but Iran better reopen the Strait of Hormuz 100% unconditionally. Iran says, well, we're glad to hear that Trump accepted our 10-point plan, because our 10-point plan for reopening the Strait and doing everything else in the ceasefire includes America paying full war reparations to Iran, America agreeing to remove all of its troops from the Middle East, America agreeing that for eternity, Iran gets to control the Strait of Hormuz, 20% of the world's oil and gas, and finally lifting of all U.S. sanctions against Iran. Iran claims Trump agreed all to that as a condition for reopening the Strait. Well, Trump is now claiming that Iran agreed to reopen the Strait for the ceasefire for 2 weeks. Iran said, yeah, we're going to reopen it. You just have to, each ship has to check in with the Iranian military, and, you know, our technical limitations might slow things down. Meaning, Iran, this was an open waterway that everybody could pass through. Iran is now going to restrict who comes through the Strait of Hormuz. Every single ship has to check in with the Iranian military and get approval first. And because Iran has to approve every single ship during the ceasefire, they might not get to everybody. So the Strait of Hormuz has not been reopened. We have just ceded control of the Strait of Hormuz to Iran as part of the ceasefire. Unless Trump is insane, I would imagine he's going to say, I'm not very thrilled about this ceasefire. So guys, stay tuned, because it's not clear that we have a ceasefire at all.
In case you haven't noticed yet, today is April 6, 2026. The United States has spent anywhere from $25 to $45 billion on the war in Iran so far. We have currently lost 13 military bases from the war as well. Now, if you don't understand how much that is, NASA's budget is less than $25 billion a year as per 2026. The Department of Defense, or the Department of War, is asking for $200 billion to fund this war, and Trump is asking for $1.5 trillion of a military budget while cutting 10% of all domestic services to fund the war.
A whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again. That was Trump's tweet this morning, April 7th, 2026. A whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again. He said that, referring to the bombing he intends to carry out on Iran tonight, if they don't open the Strait of Hormuz. And to be clear, Iran has said it ain't happening. Iran has responded saying, if you do that, if you try to bomb us, we will take your allies back to the Stone Age. And in fact, Iran did carry out multiple strikes last night, including desalination plants on some of its neighbors. Someone has to stop him, right? We know this. Someone has to stop him. And who will it be? The military, for their part, have been having some pushback. We know that multiple high-level generals and other officers refuse to follow orders. And I think 12 of them have been fired so far, including the Joint Chief of Staff. So the military is attempting to stand up with the power that it has, although they're just getting rid of all the ones who will stand up so that the ones who will go along, who are yes men, will do what Trump wants them to do. So if we don't stop them, who will? Do you really think the world can let this happen? Do you think the world, because if we do this to Iran, who's next? And the rest of the world is watching this, asking that exact question. Go love your neighbor.
As the war with Iran continues and the Strait of Hormuz remains closed, more and more countries are dealing with energy shortages, with some countries like the Philippines declaring a full-blown energy crisis, claiming that they only have 45 days left of fuel reserves.
98% of the Philippines' oil supplies comes through the Persian Gulf. And so the country has really been suffering from everything from transportation to the price of rice, which has more than doubled as well, because of course rice has to be transported from wherever it's imported from into the cities and out to the rural areas as well. There was another rate hike just today, and that takes the price of diesel and petrol as well to more than double since the conflict started.
South Korea has raised its energy alert level to a warning, the step below emergency, and it's also called upon people to conserve fuel as well.
Since the onset of the Middle East conflict, the alert has been raised in stages roughly every 2 weeks, reflecting growing concerns over potential supply disruptions. The government is calling on the public to use less energy. Starting next week, the public sector's vehicle rotation will be tightened from a 5-day to a 2-day system, with an odd-even schedule based on the last digits of a vehicle's license plate.
Japan has responded to the energy crisis by instituting similar measures while also releasing 80 million barrels of oil from its strategic reserves, of which there are 470 million barrels of oil in total. When Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi met with President Trump in Washington, D.C., he asked her to use the Japanese military to go to the Strait of Hormuz. However, she responded that the treaty signed after World War II prevented the Japanese Navy from being used in such a manner. In Taiwan, fuel prices remain relatively stable due to the fact that CPC Corp, the country's main fuel supplier, is state-owned, and they are simply absorbing the costs themselves. As for the country itself, if you're familiar with Taiwan, they've been going through a period of denuclearization since 2011 following the Fukushima incident in Japan. However, given the energy crisis currently at play, the country is now reconsidering their position on nuclear power and considering increasing nuclear power production. South Korea is also increasing nuclear power production to subsidize the current energy crisis in their country too. The war is also affecting South Asia as well. In Pakistan, fuel prices have risen dramatically. Diesel is up by over 50% and petrol is up by over 40%. In Sri Lanka, the country has instituted a no day of work on all Wednesdays in order to reduce fuel demand in the country. In India, there's a concern about rising natural gas prices, but also for the rise of urea, a nitrogen-based fertilizer, because the Strait of Hormuz not only provides about 20% of the world's liquefied natural gas and oil, but also half of the world's urea, the most commonly used nitrogen-based fertilizer. So essentially, if farmers are not able to purchase enough fertilizer, they won't be able to have high enough yields of rice, which could create a food crisis in the country, whose population is over 1 billion. And because of this, millions of people could potentially starve in the process. In Africa, South Sudan has instituted electricity rationing. In Mauritius, they're claiming that they only have 15 to 20 days left of fuel reserves, and in Uganda, they're claiming they only have 21 to 26 days left of fuel reserves. Conditions in Cuba have deteriorated severely due to the fact that President Trump has instituted a policy where any country who trades or sends oil to Cuba will be met with retaliatory tariffs or potential military action as per Venezuela. Because of this, the country deals with rolling blackouts and a lack of infrastructure as more and more people are without electricity for hours at a time. However, 3 days ago, a Russian oil tanker actually did manage to get through the blockade and into Cuba, providing some relief. In Europe, natural gas prices have nearly doubled since the conflict began, especially after after Iranian drones destroyed Qatari natural gas refineries. In France, about 10% of all gas stations or petrol stations in the country are dealing with some degree of energy shortage. The energy crisis in Europe is considered the worst in the continent since at least the 1970s, and there's no clear indication when prices will return to pre-war levels. So as you can see, this fuel crisis is affecting almost the entire world, if not the entire world. Now, one thing that I want to point out was that I was wrong in my last video. I was concerned that the United States would deploy ground troops to Iran on Good Friday, or the evening of Good Friday. Luckily, that hasn't happened, so I was wrong, thankfully, so far. And yet, this crisis still remains in full effect where people are not able to access the fuel that they need, and especially it affects countries in East Asia who are major net importers of oil. If you're familiar with the attack on Pearl Harbor, you understand that if people don't have access to fuel, nor if they have access to food, they become desperate. They turn to crime, and eventually they turn to conflict. My main concern is the rise of tensions worldwide as they are currently dealing with an energy crisis or an energy crunch of some kind. If that crisis is not abated in time, then people will get more desperate, which could be highly concerning in the future. What makes this so frustrating is how painfully unnecessary this all was. There was no reason for war with Iran. The justifications for war with Iran are based on a lie, either that they had a nuclear program or that we are going to liberate the country through airstrikes, which has never been done before and it will not happen here. What's also incredibly unusual is that this is a unilateral result of voting for Donald Trump in 2024. Because usually with all of these political meanderings, there's a bunch of different reasons for things to happen. But in this specific case, it actually was because Donald Trump was elected because he went to war with Iran without congressional approval. As Americans, we live fairly insulated lives where we often don't understand why people hate this country. We often don't understand how much our own country has affected or disaffected other people's lives. And this is a clear-cut example of that. Solely because of the actions of the United States, so many people all over the world are currently struggling to meet their fuel needs and to meet their budgetary needs for their daily lives. That is on us, and that is something that we need to take responsibility for.
No one else is talking about this, but is nuclear warfare more likely now with the tensions that are happening in the Middle East and the war with Iran? The first and only times that nuclear warfare has ever been used was by the US in Japan, and whenever we look at the astrology of that date, we see that there's a close Mars-Uranus conjunction. Fast forward a few days later with Nagasaki, and we can also see that the conjunction gets a little bit closer here with Mars at 11 degrees and Uranus at 16. Now, I'm not saying that this is going to happen on April 8th, which is around the time that Trump has said that he's going to blow Iran into oblivion. However, I want to note that Mars is here at 29 degrees, the critical degree, along with Uranus. I do foresee it happening would be July 4th when Uranus and Mars are both making a conjunction together in the sign of Gemini, which is where they were last at during World War II.